Hi Z, how are you?
How's it going?
All right, how are you? Good.
Good.
So we're waiting for a couple more people, of course.
Mm-hmm.
What have you been up to this week?
Well, I gave a presentation on the retina stuff. Basically, just like to introduce my idea to a group, and that's it. Maybe some more references.
Yeah.
Mm.
So they thought it was pretty good, or they were impressed.
They're interested in it. And also, yeah, furthermore discussion with my professor, with my mentor.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Yeah. So you're coming along on that, or you guys are working on it?
Yep.
Yeah, that sounds good. Let's see. Hi, Ankit.
Hi.
How are you?
Fine.
Good.
Fine.
So,
Hi.
So how were your exams?
Like just passed.
Oh, good. Yeah. So you said that you had a bunch of stuff that you were working on or planning to work on. So
Yeah,
what's the
exactly.
status of
Planning
that?
to work on. Yeah. Actually, my exams ended on this Thursday, so I just had one day to like recollect all the things that I was doing and then get back to work again. So I wrote you something on Slack. Yeah, so,
Yeah. So yeah. So it sounds like you guys your terms are coming along. Uh, and I was talking about the paper that. So I don't think Ankit's seen the paper, but
yeah,
I'm sure.
I was just seeing the paper.
Oh, yeah, you have the link.
Yeah.
So what do you think? I mean, do you have any questions or?
Uh, I was thinking.
Okay.
Mhm.
So let me put the link in
Yeah.
here for Z.
Yeah. So, as
So let's see. Let me. Sure, I was gonna go through it. I was gonna actually tell you what was going on in it.
mm-hmm.
So
And how we are associated with the part that we are.
yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Let's see. So you can see my screen.
Yeah, I can see.
Okay, so here's the title. I mean, it's subject to revision, but the idea is to go
Mm-hmm.
through and make an argument for, why this approach is good for the things we've been talking about in this group. There's some
Mm-hmm.
motivation here and some talk about neurodevelopment, and
Mm-hmm.
then there's some suitability for modeling development. And
Yeah.
there's a part on neurodevelopment and brain networks. Then that's something that
Mm-hmm.
all those things are not really that directly related to what you're doing, but it's like we can discuss if you wanted to add in a section there, because it is. Eventually, we're going to talk about what you're doing, so we might want to add in a section in that area.
Exactly.
Then there's another section called Models of Regulation. So this is where, actually, I was talking to Jesse about contributing to this. He's been doing some work on cybernetics, and he might be able to contribute in that section some pretty, things that might tie it together a little bit more. And then we talk about a general computational model of developmental neuroscience. So it's like taking the vehicles and kind of rooting them into a larger context. And then we get to the software instantiations. And so Ziyi actually has already written up quite a bit of work on his stuff. So if you visit that link, it's his GitHub repository. You'll see like how he wrote up his results. And then Stefan has a section to contribute. And then this would be yours. The Bradenberg vehicles is deep learning. So, I don't know how you want to approach that or how much you want to put in the paper, but, you can, best thing to do is like kind of do what Z did and prepare something, maybe even if it's like a private repo, you can make it a private repo and send it along. And then we can, I can incorporate it. And then at the end, we'll have discussion and future plans, which is like just kind of tying everything together, and then the references. So references are good if you can get references on your area. Z has about 10 or 11 that he put into the write-up, but that's, you can put in, maybe 5 or 6. She has 5 or 6, and it should be okay. Just make sure you cite things when you mention, So that's basically the outline. So
looks good.
Okay.
So, I would add the way I'm approaching the problem and the things that I have done until now.
Okay.
That are like the simulations that I have made. So I'll just like Z, I'll make a presentation or prepare a README file with the codes and everything and the references, as you said. So as the work is not completely, but I have the idea, so I will write how I will approach the problem and do it ultimately, and also at the same time updating with the things that I've already done. So I'm thinking of the other dates you said that to attach a video of the simulation. So I'm preparing to do that this coming week.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
And I think we can have supplemental materials too. So we can probably have like videos or something.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I was thinking, and also looking at my idea from the book that I felt was in the book it was written that firstly you just out of randomness you define some set of rules, and then from those rules you are seeing that some behaviors are emerging. So it's kind of a reverse engineering thing which is happening. So we firstly we don't know that this kind of behavior may emerge, but since we know that some kind of behavior is emerging out of that, then we say that for that behavior, that kind of neural network or that kind of wiring is responsible. So I think that will be a good idea to present in front of anybody. And I was reading the paper. It was said that this like the simulation of some C. elegans or some other species, the neural network simulation is not that feasible. So we can make artificial neural wiring and just explain that this behavior is coming out of this kind of wiring. So
yeah. Yeah, so you're talking about emergence. So that actually might be a good thing to put in the paper section on that, like maybe more specific to or to the vehicles, or maybe some model organisms. Let me put it down. And I'll put a note in that's yeah, and like, you know, it's like basically how, you know, you have the sort of the you apply rules, and then you have this emergent behavior, and you know, it's a little bit different in, like, you know, it's, people talk about it in a general sense, but we can also talk about it very specific to these sorts of things. I was also talking, I don't know if you remember, I was talking to some people in OpenWorm about applying this to robots. And I was talking to Tom Portuguese, who's he works with the robots there, and I was telling him about your project, and he said he was interested maybe in working with you a little bit. He said he's actually working on something involving honeybees, and I'm not sure what it is, but he was like telling me that there might be some tie between those two things, and then to apply it to the robots, but he wasn't really 100% sure. So I gave him a quick overview of what you were doing, and that's what he had suggested. But I mean, one of the things that you might want to do for your project is to have a short demo, and it could be a video or PowerPoint slides. But something, if like Tom asks you what you're doing, you can show him, like you can do a demo, and he can see what it is.
Exactly. So that I will hopefully, obviously I'm free for another month. Like my end semester exams will start in mid-November, so I'm free till then. So I will obviously continue with this thing. So and another thing that I was thinking of, like adding to the paper, or some new idea that came out of that simulation, was using this Ratenberg vehicle algorithms or model as an algorithm for swarm intelligence. So as I'm introducing multiple vehicles, there is some kind of swarm behavior that is emergent again. So we can we like engage that also in the same thing, or that will be for later?
Well, yeah, we probably could. I mean, when Stefan was working on his project, he used genetic algorithms as a sort of a way to, sort of reinforce certain behaviors. So I think that, swarm intelligence could be used in the same way. It depends on what kinds of behaviors you want to reinforce. But, so swarm intelligence or swarm programming is where, you have a bunch of agents and they're exploring the space, and they're they basically converge upon, how an algorithm converges upon a solution. Well, they do this sort of literally. All the agents kind of update their position, and they kind of get attracted to a certain solution, but they do this collectively. So they do some communication. It's kind of like ants or bees. They'll communicate between one another, and then they'll guide each other. So, one bee might find a food source, and they'll alert the other bees through some sort of dance or pheromone, and then the other bees will come to that spot, and they'll collectively find things. And so swarm intelligence is kind of like that. So if you had a number of vehicles, you could do that. You could apply. I don't know what the state of the art in swarm intelligence is. I know that they've been doing it for a long time.
So I would say that what happens is there are small representatives of that intelligence, which are given a set of rules, who when like the individual members when they obey that set of rules, then as lots of agents are obeying that set of rules, so actually a very organized or wholesome meaning comes out of that thing. So I think we could use that as like in our case also we have single vehicles, and we are actually giving them a set of rules. So a set of rules and activation functions, how that varies. So if we propose it in such a way that for this kind of behavior we are giving this set of rules to the particular vehicle, and they are together they represent some different kind of behavior or some specific kind of behavior. So that I have come up till now. But as I was saying in the Slack some day ago with you, that this behavior that I observed, it happened when I have only single type of vehicles altogether. But we have all types of vehicles in the same environment, so we could have like a different type of some other emergent behavior that might come. So yeah.
Yeah. So I had a question about your project. So it's when you have a simulation, all the vehicles are of the same type, so they all have like a hardwired behavior, but they're like doing things collectively. So then you could mix you could take vehicles of one type and another and put them in the same environment, and it would like produce different types of behavior. Yeah.
Yeah. So that will be like different type of behavior for different vehicles, but collectively they might just show a wholesome different type of behavior. So that would be like the vehicle is making sense of these things. In the book, maybe it is written that the vehicle is adding values to certain things, that it is staying in the colder places and not going to some particular kind of order. So simultaneously doing the same different type of behavior. So that I was thinking to do. So that is yet to do because I'm still stuck at like organizing the code and firstly hardwiring a particular different type of vehicles. Thereafter, I'll move on to mixing them together.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's a lot. Yeah, that's a lot to tease out if you start like mixing them in a lot. So I recommend going about it just by kind of doing experiments and writing down what you get. You know, if you have a, maybe like try two different types of vehicles at 50-50 proportion. Oh, there he is, Stefan. And then looking at what happens. And so, you don't want to just do it at random because you want to actually see what the outcome is. So, yeah, I mean, it sounds exciting, though. And I don't know if you remember Jesse's presentation on the neurodynamics.
I wasn't present, perhaps.
Probably not, yeah. Well, Jesse gave a presentation on neurodynamics. And, he talked about attractors, strange attractors, and things like that like they sort of accumulated from the behavioral output of the vehicles. And so like the vehicles were doing these behaviors and they were able to characterize it as like an attractor, so like it's like they converged upon certain behaviors. That can also be used kind of like in collective behavior as well. You can sort of figure out what if they're converging upon some sort of behavior. And they're hardwired for behavior, but like, are they converging upon, moving towards certain targets or what they're doing? Because, that might be a useful way to look at it. Because they're probably not just going to go straight to the target. They'll probably do some, especially once you start mixing in vehicles, they'll need to be doing some interesting behaviors. So, I just kind of wanted to make you aware of that.
So,
yeah. Jesse, do you still have those slides on neurodynamics? Or do you have a link to them? I mean, you can put it in Slack if you have a...
Exactly.
Okay, thanks. So Stefan, hi.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, I haven't seen you in a while. You've been busy.
Yeah, it's been a time. It's been a time. I was just in some place where internet was not that good.
Oh yeah.
That's why I couldn't really join the meeting.
Yeah. So and then Jesse's here. Hi.
So yeah,
Jesse.
sorry for that, but now I'm here.
Oh,
Glad
that's
to
fine.
see you all.
Yeah. We've been just continuing on with stuff, and we've been talking about Ziyi has some. He's working on a project with a retina. He's simulating the retina, and he's been actually interested in genetic algorithms for that purpose. So, I told him that you were doing genetic algorithm stuff over the summer, and yeah,
we've talked about this already. Like we've had this discussion. I remember.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, how's it been though? So,
that's nice.
Like, do you make some progress? I mean, did you already do something about this, like about the project, or have you maybe discussed it? I don't know, like about this retina project that we've talked about. Retina project, like you also were inquiring about genetic algorithms, so that's the topic. Do you remember?
Sorry, I project.
Retina. So you were trying to simulate retina processes.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I just wonder if you have made something like after the time we've talked about it last time. It's interesting.
Actually, I just I did some experiments. I still find a model, so because I'm just trying to model one type of cell, which is horizontal cell development of those in the retina, and all other parts like photoreceptors and further afferent neurons are just pertaining. So I'm currently doing experiments on those. I haven't developed the genetic algorithm yet because I'm still thinking about the variables, especially spatial layout stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
But I think I'll go to that soon.
Yeah. So and then Stefan, you've been ramping up your fall. What have you been up to?
You mean like ramping up?
Your bioinformatics work that you've been doing.
Oh yeah. Like right now we are doing some model for splicing.
Okay.
So we have like a really, let's say really good experiment design. So they were measured, there were something like 80,000 measurements or observations of polymerase activity throughout the introns. And so the guys, they were really able to capture how much, how long does it take to perform splicing on donor and acceptor side inclusively.
Okay.
So now we are kind of trying to do some deep learning model based on this data.
Wow.
That's what I'm currently doing.
Pretty good.
It's also, kind of impressive stuff.
Yeah.
I hope there will be something.
Yeah, it sounds like there will probably be something. Usually, those sorts of things, you're just kind of in a sort of a frontier area, so anything you find is interesting. So, and I don't mean that you just have to sell whatever you find, but I mean it's you can always find something that no one's ever found before, because you're using a relatively unstudied system, and then you're applying something with deep learning.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we hope so. So let's see what happens.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So, actually, I don't think Stefan has seen the paper. So, let me find this link. I put it in the chat earlier, but I'll probably have to re-up it here. This is a manuscript that I kind of put together, and then we're contributing to for the summer, this project, Bradenburg vehicles. So let me share my screen actually. I kind of want to go through it with you. So this is, going to be I envision it as being a manuscript that would be submitted to a peer-reviewed journal. And so this is the working title, Bradenburg Vehicles as Developmental Neurosimulation. And, we can, I don't know if we want to change that or not, but the abstract will be the last thing we do, as well as settle on a final title. So there's an introduction and a motivation for the work. So the idea is to root the Bradenburg Vehicles work in some sort of context, neurobiological context. But we also want to mention some simulations of the brain as well. So we go through the introduction to Bradenburg Vehicles and the approach, then go into the motivation for the problems that we're going to talk about. Then some stuff on neurodevelopment. I still have to work on that, and you're welcome to contribute if anyone knows of any good references that we want to incorporate in that section. Please put them sort of in the comments or bring them to my attention, and we'll put them in. And then we have suitability for modeling development. So we have maybe a couple points here on why is it that we want to use Bradenburg vehicles to model development. Now, I know that Ankit is doing taking a slightly different approach to this, and we might modify it accordingly. But I just want to go through this because later we're going to give specific examples of the work. And so then there are some other sections we might add in. Ankit's interested in doing a section on emergence, and Jesse's interested in talking about models of regulation. So those will be important. And then that leads into more of a general conversation on how do you build a computational model for developmental neuroscience. And then we get into the software instantiations, which this is where you can contribute your sort of write-up of your project. So let me put a note in here. This is for Stefan. Ziyi, for example, has already done a write-up of his contributions. So let me show you what that looks like. So he's kind of written it down in Markdown. So he's kind of outlined everything here. And then he's given an introduction to what his specific application is about. So, and then, then he goes through the components. So in his case, the olfactory system is important, the gustatory system, the associative memory, and I guess we can put in a part on how it's implemented, because this is sort of more details and implementation. Then, he gets into associative memory, so there's some equations, and, we have some diagrams for showing what it looks like. And then after you walk through some of the features of the software, then you might take a screenshot of the environment, and then maybe we can talk about future plans. We can put that in the last part of the paper, and then maybe some we talked about use cases. And so that's basically how you might want to lay it out, and we'll put it in this section here. And then Z's section will go here, and then Ankit has his application, and his section would go here. And then. So
are we just? Sorry, I have a question.
Oh, okay.
Are we just going to copy it over from the Markdown to the paper straight away, or are you giving links to Markdowns?
Well, maybe we could do a rough draft in Markdown, just so that you can get it laid out, and then we're going to transfer it into the paper. Looking at Z's, we might use the future, he has a couple sections at the bottom that might go well in the discussion. So you see that there's a discussion section here, and that's actually where we might also talk about use cases. So you presented the use case of like kind of spatial cognition and TSP in your INCF presentation. You might like write a couple sentences about that, how you envision that to go, and then we can put it in that last section. But then,
Okay.
yeah. Otherwise, it's largely an outline of what you did, and then put it in like a markdown file, and then we can transfer it into the main document. It's pretty easy to cut and paste, and then kind of edit things in the document once they're in place. So I would suggest doing like a markdown document, and then we can put it in the paper. Now, in terms of like how we want to present the work, I don't think they'll ask us for any like experiments. Like sometimes they'll say, well, it'd be nice if you could do some experiments. So I don't think that people ask for that, but it depends on where we submit it. So we have to think about where we might want to submit it to. I don't have any like strong preferences, but if you know of a place you think that might be a good candidate journal, please bring it up and make your case for why this would be a good fit. And that goes for everyone.
Yeah.
Now, like we, depending on where we submit it, we might have to modify it a bit because different journals kind of focus on different things. Like we might not be able to submit it to a hardcore modeling journal because they would definitely want experiments. And we do them, but it's like I don't know what their standards are generally high for experiments. Like they want you to run like a lot of experiments and like give some like pretty detailed results. So this is sort of like an exposition paper, I guess, because we have like multiple projects and we kind of want to showcase them. So that's basically the idea. Is if people can get a good sense of like what was done and maybe like some screenshots. Ankit talked about putting together a video of his stuff because the dynamics of it are important. It's more impressive when you see some when you see it running in a movie than a screenshot, because it's like, oh, that's how it works. So so you can put in videos, we can do like a supplemental materials, but we can also do just like screenshots, and that would be probably sufficient. And so then the final part of this, of course, are references. Now Ziyi has put in like probably about 7 references in his write-up. So it doesn't have to be 7, but I would prefer that people would cite things. If you have something like a resource that you used, or if you're talking about something, please provide a citation, because it's much easier to do it prospectively than to try to dig up the reference later. He said, oh, I wrote this, but I can't remember the reference. I've done that a lot, where you write something and then you're like, what did I cite? Then you have to go find it. It's a lot easier to do it prospectively. But then, when you have the references, just put them down, like kind of make sure that they match the text, like you cite them in the text. And then when we put them in the main document, like we know which references are which. I've already kind of done that with Ziyi's references. I've kind of numbered them. Well, not in this one. So I've numbered them. And so now I know kind of where they are. So number of references is infinite, I guess. People don't really. If the more references, the better. Don't get gratuitous with it, but I think 7 to 10 is like fine for something like this, where you're describing your project. So definitely, if you have open source software that you want to cite, provide the link. We can put it in like maybe we'll create a methods section too, where we have kind of like kind of go over some of the open source software resources that were used. So I know that Stefan had some open source software because they rely on that too. A lot of these open source projects, sometimes they get funding from agencies and they want to have their work cited. So it's good to cite if they have a paper, if they have like a paper that they wrote to, as to lay out their vision. We should cite that because they do rely on those papers to get funding and so forth. So
I will provide citations. Don't worry about me.
Yeah.
I will give you enough references.
I just wanted everyone to know these things.
Sure.
Yeah,
I don't know that.
good.
Thank you.
Okay. So
So you are. Yeah.
what was that?
I was just saying that you asked about the open source softwares that we use. So basically, the libraries that I'm using for simulations and lots of things can be put up as references if you want.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if they all have like papers, but like if you cite the repo, just kind of like where you download it. So if it's like a Python library, just mention the version and like where how you might go about downloading it. So people they have some awareness of how you would do something like this with Python libraries. And again, Python libraries are people put a lot of effort into them. They like to see them cited, even if it's just like telling people that you use them. So yeah, and then so that's good. Then we can go through that, and everyone can give their contributions, and then we can put this together. And the timetable. Maybe we could try to shoot for the end of the year in terms of like when we want to have everything together. I think once we have our parts in place, it'll be much easier to go through it and edit it. But actually, the write-up, it should be relatively easy because you've already got the notes written down. It's just a matter of getting the notes put into some form that we can put into the paper. I also wanted to mention to Jesse. So we talked about this section here, models of regulation. So this again can operate by the same principle. We can have a sort of you can write up something. Then this is going to be more sort of like you don't have to mention code or anything, but we just we want to have something good that cites a number of references. It kind of lays out an argument for maybe how like you could apply models of regulation to this. Yeah. And so again with this it'll be more, I think that'll be more interactive between you and I in terms of getting the sort of rough draft together, because it's kind of like how do you make this argument, how do you interpret this paper, but still just like prepare it in isolation and then we can put it into the main paper. So okay, so any other questions on that? Or
I had a question, just a query about we are actually trying to present this paper in this form of a new idea of neural development simulation. So what we can do is we don't have at least I don't have the results completely ready, like the deep learning part. So you told that the journals want us to do a lot of experiments. So can we just represent our idea, keeping update of whatever is done or what we want to do in future? Will that work, or we need to get the results when we are submitting the final results?
So that's probably Ankit, I don't have it either. So we are going to do just promises. We don't have any real data. That's got to be some philosophic paper more than natural life sciences one.
But So as a follow-up, we can when this paper goes out, it's a good idea that we can do these things. But if the larger community recognizes this, then we can develop it in further, and we can get another paper with all the results and data that whatever we want.
Yeah. So
Yeah, if you have.
yeah.
Yeah, this I was thinking that how can we go about this thing?
Oh.
Uh,
Well, I mean, like,
Firstly,
I think like you
yeah,
saw with Ziyi's write up, I mean, it's largely going to be like that part of the paper would be just to explain how your approach works and like, maybe give some screenshots of how, or a movie of how, like a demo. Think of it like
yeah,
you were demoing it for the community. And then,
mhm,
you might say, this is how it works. This is how, maybe show some screenshots or some movies of it in action, and then say, okay, this is how we might use it in the future. So that's what the discussions part was. So like, what kinds of, we talked about use cases, Stefan and I, and then Ziyi talked about it too. So use
mhm,
cases are like, think of ways in which you could use this. So like,
mhm,
you use it like, okay, you have this swarm model and you're incorporating deep learning. So what kinds of problems could you solve with it? And so, like, it's
uh,
different than, like, for Stefan and Z, they were focused on more, like, you could use it to look at different types of experiments. In your case, it's a little bit different because you might be able to analyze data sets with it. So it's like, but it doesn't really matter what the sort of the focus is. It's just, how you use this in the future. So, I mean, it's largely, this paper is largely for people to give exposure to what we have in platforms and what people have been working on. And then, maybe people are interested in running with it further, collaborating on running experiments or whatever. But this is just largely a focus of like an exposition of what we can do with vehicles. And so,
yeah,
I don't want to like get deep into experiments largely because when journals ask for experiments, they ask for a lot of them. So, it's like that gets really hairy, especially when you have three people, three different kind of approaches. It would be just like a infinite paper. And so we don't want to really do that. If you want to run a small experiment to demonstrate the platform, that might be effective. Like a small scale experiment, like where you test it with some sort of, how they do benchmarking often.
yeah. So that will be like application of whatever we are doing. So like you have to think of that.
Yeah, yeah. I think that might be feasible, and it's small enough of a scale where you don't have to like spend a lot of time on it, and then the results are easy to sort of divine what's going on, and it would show people like what the power of the platform is, but because I mean in your case it's kind of like I don't know if people would necessarily get it upon first pass. Like if you just like wrote a quick description, people might say, I don't know what's going on here. So that's what we want to
Hmm.
avoid. So we want to say,
Yeah, so
okay,
I
right,
have to write it in such a way, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah. So yeah, and another thing that I was asking is like we are presenting this as a kind of idea paper. So which are the journals or papers you are looking at to get this done?
well, I mean, they're like very general journals like PLOS One, and they don't, they're kind of so general that they don't necessarily focus on experiments.
Mm-hmm.
You could publish a paper. There are also education journals, simulation journals like I can't remember the name of it right now. There are a couple that I might have in mind. I have to put together a list to make sure
Yeah,
that they're not like, yeah, they're not so focused on like running like rigorous experiments and but would be probably more in an educational vein. Sometimes journals have like educational contributions or like different categories of papers like short reports or something. It might be suitable for that as well. So I'm gonna have to do some research on that. Or if you guys have a journal that you really like, look at the kinds of papers that they accept, and then sometimes they describe what's required, and sometimes they have different types of papers. So, you know, with like PLOS One, they have different types of papers. Like they have really detailed research reports, and then they have smaller, like you know, like communications, and that's a little bit more broad in terms of what they accept. So it's always like a matter of finding a good fit for the journal. If it's not a good fit, or if it's not typically what they publish, then it's harder to get published. And so we got to find the right fit for that. So,
I'm sorry, I gotta leave for a minute.
Okay.
Is it okay?
All right. Okay, so Jesse, he said emergence is definitely good too. So yeah, Jesse, you're welcome to contribute to the emergence section if you want to. You know, we'll be editing this in different ways. So, you know, we'll pick the strongest stuff and we'll put it in, and I'll try to include everyone. You know, yeah. You please make comments on the doc. I think everyone has permissions on this. Yeah, I think, let's see. Yeah, anyone with the link can edit. So the permissions are there. So,
it's on the...
yeah. What I would do, I mean, I would like, if you decide to put something in the document, just use a note or a comment, and then, you know, we can address the comments and put them in the paper. Or if you put some text directly in the paper, just mark it with like yellow or something, so that we know where the contributions are, and we can, you know, review them. Yeah, so it should work. Just make sure, you know, I don't want people, like, I don't want a free-for-all in the document. That's all I'm saying, because sometimes it happens and people delete each other's work, and that's a problem. A lot of times with, I mean, I think this is version controlled, so I can get back an old version, but be a little bit careful. So I guess, I don't know, Stefan had to leave for a minute. I guess I want to tell you a little bit about something we're doing in the DevoWorm group. So we're doing this thing called DevoWorm ML, and it's like a machine learning interest group within that organization. Or, I mean, I've invited people from outside the organization, and we're just kind of reviewing machine learning techniques and things. Jesse's involved in it. And, you know, it's just kind of a very casual introduction, because we have developmental biologists involved. And so I've actually assembled a number of resources here. I don't know if I have the link right now. Let me see if I can remember it. I think the link is... Yeah, I think that's the link. Yeah, that's it. So, I mean, we have in this, let me go to share my screen here. So we've had a couple of sessions so far, and I'm trying to make this like open, like not only people attending the meetings, but generally useful. So, where is it? Here it is. So this is the repo. We have a README here, which basically describes it. So I've got video and I've got slides. So got the lectures recorded and then slides for the lectures. So if a topic interests you, you can click on the slides or watch the video and it'll be there. Last week we talked about input data, which was about, you know, if you have a machine, if you want to apply machine learning to something or deep learning, you know, it's interesting and it might be useful, but like you have to really be mindful of your input data. And so we talked about that. And that, you know, that's, again, like it's something for people who are starting out in machine learning and maybe unsure about what they might want to, how they want to do this. We also talked about OpenDevoCell, which was another Google Summer of Code student in the OpenRun Foundation, and he did a project on cell segmentation. So he took microscopy images of embryos, and he was segmenting cells. and he created an app, that's available on the web, so you can upload images and download like positional information, size information of the cells, and then also an image that's segmented. So he presented on that work. Then there's another group that I've been working with of people on this thing, digital basilaria. So basilaria is a microorganism that lives in the sea, and it's has very interesting movement patterns. And so the students I was guiding through that actually use deep learning to analyze the cells, segment the cells, and analyze things. And so I presented on that work too. They were contributed to it. So we have a bunch of lectures here, and I'm kind of going through different topics as people propose them. So you're welcome if you have anything, if you want to like come by and do a talk on something you're interested in, you're perfectly welcome to. Otherwise, these references are here for you, these resources. So we have the meeting materials, and then we have the also a nice tutorial resources page. And this is something we're assembling where we have like a list of off-the-shelf tools. And I've just got some like common ones here, Weka, TensorFlow. We've got some pre-trained models. So these are just readings about how, different pre-trained models that exist. This is largely for deep learning, but they use them in nonlinear programming as well a lot. There are also some tutorials on machine learning, sort of math-oriented tutorials, a range of techniques, so naive Bayes, evolution strategies, but also code-oriented tutorials like Kaggle-based tutorials and some data science stuff. And then finally we have some links to MOOCs, which are like online course materials that exist, and then applications to biology, which are just papers that people, published, and then some allied methods, which kind of go beyond the machine learning area, the direct machine learning area. So, what I'm trying to do there is I'm trying to assemble resources for like beginners in machine learning and applying it to like biology. So again, like that's something, if you want to check it out, please do. Jesse already like attends the meetings, so he's that's something he's interested in. That's so everything is open, and if you even if you have something to like suggest for what we should cover, you're welcome to make the suggestion. And so I just wanted to point you to those resources. It might be of interest to people. Yeah. So anything else going on that you want to talk about this week? Yeah. Jesse said the meetings are good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So I will document the things this week, and let's see what happens.
Okay. Yeah. I'm glad glad everything went well for your courses, your exams, and yeah, we'll be talking on Slack, I'm sure. Jesse said he's going to start in the document this week. Yeah, personal wit review and some project stuff too. So yeah, Jesse, whenever you want to talk more about your work that you're doing, feel welcome to, we can set aside some time in the meeting here. Yeah, you're welcome. So I send Jesse some more papers in sync. Stefan, any questions or things you want to add? Okay.
No.
About Ziyi, do you have anything to add?
No.
Okay. Well, thanks for attending, and have a good week. Have a successful week. And we'll talk on Slack if need be, and otherwise we'll meet next week.
Yeah.
All right. All right, guys, have a good week.
Mm.
All right.
Bye.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Have a good week.
Okay.